It's Wednesday, November 1st. I'm your host, Sarah Beal. Thank you for joining us. We have a great show in store for you today. On today's show, we get an update from Police Chief Paul McDonald. Then we will check in with Finance Director Mark Milne. And finally, we'll hear from Town Clerk Ann Quirk on next week's election. But first, let's get a look at today's top headlines. A reminder from the Harbor Master's office, all boaters should use extreme caution when transiting Town of Barnstable waters. As of November 1st, today, all town-owned aids to navigation will start to be hauled. Coupled with recent weather events and the possibility that some aids may be off station, navigation through typically marked channels may be difficult. Please use prudent seamanship and maintain a constant lookout. Oyster season will be open in the town of Barnstable, the south side Bay Street, Osterville, and the north side Scudder Lane, Barnstable, starting today, November 1st. You must have a shellfish permit in order to harvest oysters, which you can get Monday through Friday at the Marine and Environmental Affairs offices on Finney's Lane from 8:30 to 4:15 p.m. Please remember the limit is a half a peck per week. If you have any questions, please call 508-790-6272. The Town of Barnstable Public Health Division will hold a flu clinic at the St. George Greek Orthodox Church Community Center on Wednesday, November 8th from 3 to 5 p.m. The clinic is open to town residents only and the fee is $3. For more information, you can call the Health Division at 508-862-4644. The 25th session of Inside Barnstable Town Government, a Citizens Leadership Academy, will begin on Tuesday, January 30th, 2018. The Academy is an 11-week commitment with the goal of educating the citizens of Barnstable about the operations of town government while also obtaining valuable feedback and participation from those citizens participating in the Academy. To date, over 700 Barnstable residents and employees have participated in the program. The classes will be on Tuesday evenings from 6:30 to 9 p.m. and will be held in various locations throughout the town. The program is free of charge and open to anyone who resides or works in the town of Barnstable. Class size is limited, so please register early to avoid the waiting list. Applications are available at the Town Manager's office or online at www.townofbarnstable.us. Up next, we'll talk with Police Chief Paul McDonald. Chief, thank you so much for joining us today. We have a few things to chat about today. You had a drug take-back program over the weekend. What can you tell me about this?
This is the biannual event that DEA sponsors across the state and across the Cape Cod. All 15 towns participate in it. What they do is they advertise and they encourage people to come in and drop off their unwanted medication to the front lobby at the PD. We should also note that we have a drug drop box at the lobby that's available to everybody 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Anytime you want to get rid of your medication, we encourage people to bring it here and drop it in the drop box. No questions asked, and then we save it at the end of the 6-month period. When DEA has an operation like this, we then, whatever we collect last Saturday plus everything we've collected for the prior 6 months, we turn over to the DEA. And this past Saturday, we turned in over 530 pounds of unwanted medication. That's just for the town of Barnstable. So that was huge. That's a huge amount of drugs.
Wow. And can you explain a little bit the reasons why we don't want people just throwing their prescription medicines away so people maybe can understand why you do this drug take-back program?
Well, obviously, there's an opiate epidemic ongoing out in our community and across the Cape and across the state, and one of the main things people do, they break into houses, is they're looking for this medication, and a lot of this medication is highly addictive, and it's not unusual for some individuals to become addicted by getting this type of medication. We also do not want people to dispose of unwanted medication. They got it was prescribed to them, and for whatever reason they didn't use it all, it's left over. We do not want them to dispose of it by pouring it down the drain or putting it in the toilet and flushing it into the wastewater system, which eventually makes its way to the sole source aquifer that we all use for our drinking water and eventually gets back to us. So we fully encourage everybody to bring it to us, and we will dispose of it. We give it to the DEA, and they incinerate all the drugs.
Wonderful. It's such a great program. I'm so glad that all the towns on Cape Cod participate in it. It's so great that you can bring your prescription medicine down to the PD, anytime and drop it off. You don't just have to wait for these take-back programs, but it's great that you participate in that.
Right, and the box is available 24 hours a day. You do not have to make an appointment. Just come in the front door and just drop it in the box, and it's secured.
Wonderful. We also want to talk about, there was a forum this past weekend, and the Community Impact Unit took part in that. What can you tell me about how the forum went and what the Community Impact Unit did at this forum?
It was a community policing forum, and the guest speaker was George Kelling, and of course he's one of the co-authors for the broken window theory, which basically it talks about if you take care of the relatively minor event in your community, you will not have to worry about the more serious crime that will probably never occur. And I think every police administrator that I know of has all read it. It dates back to the mid-1980s. He did a very good job, extremely interesting. But they also had a bunch of breakout sessions, and they're focusing on the homeless problem in and around downtown Hyannis, and they're also focusing on the opiate crisis across the Cape. And the Community Impact Unit, that's exactly what they do. And they were part of the guest speakers dealing with the homeless. And Brian Morrison was there because he is our ambassador of goodwill, talking about community policing.
Wonderful. And the last thing we want to touch on is this phone scam that's been going around.
Yes.
I know I've seen this posted on Facebook. We want to let all the residents and anyone watching the show know all about this phone scam and how they can avoid it.
We get, I got to tell you how many calls that we got last Thursday and Friday. Of course, for a couple-day period, people were calling here saying that they had these calls. People saying that if they did not send them X amount of money, their relatives, their sons, their daughters, their fathers, their mothers were kidnapped, and they were going to do harm to them if they did not immediately send this money to this such and such address. We did get the phone number. We did track the phone number back to Puerto Rico. We did notify back there, but that could be a scam also with the phone number. So we fully encourage people that please, if this does happen, contact us immediately. And if you get the number, please let us know what the number is. But do not give any money or any cash cards to anyone involved in this, because this is definitely a scam. And the scams have been around for a long, long time.
It's very scary to get a call like that, and you immediately think, oh no, do I have a family member abroad? Do I have a family member that could be in danger? But most often that's not how this works, and it's just a scam.
It's almost never on the up and up. But they do make it realistic. As they're saying that we're going to hurt this individual, there is someone in the background screaming for help.
Right.
Screaming for mom, screaming for dad. I need help. Please send the money. But it's all a hoax.
Yep. Great. Thank you so much, Chief, for filling us in on all these wonderful things, and I really appreciate it. Look forward to talking to you again next week.
Okay. Good talking to you.
Thank you. Bye. My guest today was Barnstable Police Chief Paul McDonald. Coming up, we'll chat with Town Clerk Ann Quirk about the upcoming election. But first, we get a finance update from Finance Director Mark Milne. Mark, thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to talk about free cash, which isn't as free as it sounds.
Yeah.
But that's usually the joke that always gets made when we talk about free cash is like, oh, free cash, how do I get some of that? So what can you tell us about free cash and what exactly that is?
Sure. Every year we have to have the cash that's sitting in the town treasury that's free and clear of any encumbrances against it, certified by the state. So what they mean by the term free cash is cash in the treasury that has no encumbrances against it for things like accrued payroll, accrued vendor payments, the portion of cash that was used to balance the subsequent year's budget, any cash that was reserved under a contract for incomplete work as of the end of the fiscal year. All of that cash has to be reserved for those specific purposes, and everything that remains after that is what they call free cash, and that's what they certify every year. So we do this for the general fund and the 8 enterprise funds.
Okay, great. What does the town use their free cash for?
So we can use it for anything. It requires town council appropriation to use it, and typically what we use it for is our operating and capital budgets. We will sometimes use that to fund a particular capital project, and then sometimes we use it, or annually we use a portion of it to balance our general fund operating budget or a specific enterprise fund budget with their free cash. So, for example, we used about $2.9 million of free cash to balance the FY18 operating budget, most of that going to pay for the prior year's snow and ice removal deficit.
Yeah, there was a lot of snow and ice last year, so that was definitely a good use of that money.
Yeah, we find ourselves every year having to, because we only budget, it's one area of the operating budget the state allows communities to deficit spend. Most communities don't budget anything, and they just raise the amount that they have to cover from the prior year's deficit on the next year's budget. But we budget about $725,000 for snow and ice. but our actual expenses come in closer to $2 million. So we're working on increasing the budget every year for that particular purpose, which will require less free cash to be used to pay for that deficit.
Okay. Now it's called free cash, and it's, like you said, it's unencumbered. But are there any restrictions against what we can use it for?
No, there are no restrictions. It can be used for any purpose for which a municipality can spend taxpayers or user fees for. And the general fund has free cash as well as all 8 enterprise funds, which is one of the advantages of having enterprise funds is that they're able to keep any free cash that they generate in their respective enterprise funds so that subsequently they can use it for their particular programs.
That was going to be my next question. So those enterprise accounts generate their own free cash and it's used for their purposes. It can't be transferred between accounts.
Exactly. So the only restriction there is that, for example, the airport free cash can only be used for airport operations. We can't go and use it to fund general fund operations.
Right.
So that's the only restriction on the enterprise side of things, is that all the free cash certified for each enterprise fund must be used for that specific enterprise operation. However, free cash in the general fund could be used for any enterprise fund.
Oh, okay.
So there's a less restrictive nature on that general fund free cash, because any enterprise fund could receive a subsidy from the general fund.
Right.
And so that would represent a subsidy if we did happen to use free cash for any of the enterprise funds.
Okay. And the last question I have about this, I know that you kind of mentioned at the beginning, Town Council does approve the use of the free cash, correct?
That's correct, yes. Anytime we want to use it, it's basically what it is it's an appropriation. So any appropriation requires Town Council approval, and if we want to use the free cash to be the funding source for that appropriation, so we have to go to the council for anytime we want to use it. And that includes general fund and any of the enterprise funds. They all require Town Council approval to use them.
Mm-hmm. What would that appropriation look like if someone was, looking at the Town Council's agendas coming up, and is there a certain term that you use within the appropriation order, or is it just an appropriation?
Yeah, for example, we just had one for the council last week when we asked them to appropriate and transfer $30,000 from the general fund reserves, which is the same thing as free cash,
okay,
to finance the siting, design, and permitting of a dock or pier in the 3 Bay area. So that's what the language would look like. It would either be the funding source would either be general fund reserves or the specific enterprise fund reserves, and the reserve is synonymous with free cash.
Okay, that's a good way to know that what the wording would look like. So for our viewers and residents who are interested in where this is being used, that's what they can look for.
Yes.
Yes. The last thing I wanted to talk to you about is that the budget action calendar was just posted on the town's website. I believe recently, I think this week. Let's talk a little bit about that and what exactly the budget action calendar is.
Sure. These are just specific dates and milestones that we shoot for during the budget process. As you can see, we start towards the end of September in earnest with developing the subsequent year's capital improvement program as well as the operating budget, and it's a year-long process. We go right up until June. With the anticipation of a final Town Council public hearing on the operating budget on June 7th if needed. So these are the specific dates that certain milestones are to be met for during that budget development process. So we wanted to make that information readily available to our public, so that if they wanted to attend any of the anticipated hearings that are coming up regarding fee hearings or capital improvement appropriations or operating budget appropriations, they can check the calendar here to see when we anticipate those on happening. There could be some changes made to these dates. If needed, we will post an updated budget action calendar if any changes do occur, but this gives everybody a sense as to when those specific public hearings will take place. And the next public hearing we have will be scheduled for November 7th, 2 weeks from today, to discuss proposals for that departments have for changing their calendar year permits or fees. Mm-hmm. So that's the next date for a public hearing. Any of those The fees will be, we'll take public input on any of the proposed fee changes that are being recommended by departments. The town manager will take that testimony into consideration before he determines whether or not to approve them.
Wonderful. Now, the budget action calendar is a great tool for the residents in the town to really, if they're interested in following along with how the budget's going, what's going on, it's just another way of keeping that transparent along with your open budget software that you have. So, just another tool to keep people informed.
Exactly.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mark, for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Have a great day.
You too.
Bye. My guest today is Mark Milne. He's the finance director here in the town of Barnstable. And thank you so much for joining us. You've been on the show a lot lately, but there's been a lot of elections and things going on. We're coming up on our last election for the year, correct? No more after that, right? On November 7th.
Yes.
So there's voting in all the precincts. The even precincts are going to be voting for town council. There'll be school committee, housing committee. There's 2 questions. Mm-hmm. So where would you like to start?
Well, let's start with it is a town-wide ballot. Mm-hmm. So for all the folks who do not have, or in the odd-numbered precincts who don't have a councilor seat coming up, there's still the question of the charter question, which is on the ballot, and it's step by step. It tells you the different things that have been changed or would like to be changed. Mm-hmm. And then there's the non-binding question about the Pilgrim Power Plant, because it is decommissioning. So there are some issues that are going to come up. And we also have the Housing Authority and the School Committee, which are very important, and we want to make sure that the people get voted in. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. It's an important election no matter what.
Absolutely.
Anytime there's a town election, it's important.
It's so important because your vote really, really means so much more. Mm-hmm. It's when it's a citywide, statewide, federal ballot, we're just a small piece of that. When it goes to a presidential, we're a small piece. We all should vote, but we're still a small piece. Mm-hmm. When it comes to your town elections, because of the low turnout traditionally, your vote counts. Mm-hmm. Your vote makes a difference, and it is your voice. It's your way of letting us know how you feel. Mm-hmm.
And these are the elections that, they are part of your life on a day-to-day basis. Your town councilor is the person representing you within the town. So it's important to get out and participate in these town elections, because this is the thing that affects you directly, as opposed to some of the more national ones. I mean, they do definitely affect you, but these, like, if you're looking for, to have a voice, these are the elections to make sure that you participate in. And like you said, they're always a low voter turnout, so maybe we'll turn that around this year. Maybe there'll be a few more people that come out after they see this interview. Okay.
I hope so, yeah. Sarah. I really do, because to me, you're absolutely correct. If I have an issue in my precinct, I want to be able to go to my town councilor and say, gee, this is something I've seen. I really, I have a concern about it. Can you take this a little step further for us? Mm-hmm. Or can you look at that? And that's why your counselors are there. That's why each of your villages have counselors. And in some cases, because of the size of the village, you might have more than one counselor.
Yep.
You need to seek these folks out because they're the folks that are there for you to have a voice. And they all have email addresses, and they all have telephone numbers posted, so you can always reach them.
Right. So leading up to this election, there is absentee ballots. Let's talk about what exactly those are.
Absentee ballots are for those folks who cannot make it to the polls on election day. Now, the state sets the parameters for that. So the way it's worded is, you're not going to be in town on that day, you're too ill to leave your house, or you have something debilitating that requires you have to stay home. Or it's a religious holiday for you, and you're not going to vote on a religious holiday. Mm-hmm. Those are the parameters set by the state. If you're going to be out of town, come and see us, because you have to have your absentee ballot to us before the election day. Because once the election day is passed, it's gone. I mean, I can't make it come back.
Yep.
The other thing is that We do these by mail, and we have mailed out quite a few and have received them back. They're sealed up in their envelopes. But those ballots, you have, if you come into the office, you have until noon Monday, the day before the election. The election is the 7th, so noon on the 6th, because at noon we close and lock the door so that we can now prepare all that information for the polling places. We have to have all that set. So everybody that votes absentee signs their envelope, they fill out their envelope, and then we match it up to the voter list before it goes to the polling location. Mm-hmm. Those ballots go to the polling location on election day. And our warden zips them open we give them little envelope openers so they can zip them open, and they actually take them through the same process as if you were there at the polls that day. They walk to the check-in table and check in and quirk. And then they walk to the checkout table and they check out and quirk. And then they take that ballot and they put it right through the AccuVote, which is the name of our tabulator. Mm-hmm. And my vote or your vote or whoever votes absentee gets counted just like everyone else's.
So there's no waiting and seeing if there's a tie that needs to be broken. Every vote goes through. The absentee ballots are actually probably the first people that vote on election day.
Well, it can be. Yeah. I mean, we do usually have people that are waiting at 7 o'clock in the morning. But they want to do it before they go to work, which is great. Mm-hmm. So any lull during the day, they open up all those absentee ballot envelopes and go through that process. Mm-hmm. So they do them in batches. Yeah. So if I had 25 absentee ballots for one precinct, they might do 10 at a time and go through the whole process. Mm-hmm. But it eventually gets all gets into that machine.
Yep, they all count on that day. Every vote
all count. Every one of them, absolutely.
So the polls are open on the 7th, starting at 7 a.m.
Yes.
Until 8 p.m., just like they always are in every normal, regular election, unlike the last one that we had.
Yes.
What else do you think that people should be aware of that day?
I don't know what the weather is going to be, but our folks are going to sit there and be waiting for you no matter what's going on outside. Please come out to vote. Your vote counts. And if you have any questions, always call us. Mm-hmm. And the other thing you should know is if you voted all along and everything's been fine, you have no problem. If you haven't been voting in a long time, you need to check with us and make sure your name is still on that voter list.
It's important to make sure that you're still up to date.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you so much, Ann, for coming in.
It was my pleasure, Sarah.
Don't forget to vote on November 7th. My guest today is our town clerk, Ann Quirk. Now let's take a look at our community calendar. Let's find out what's going on at the Barnstable Senior Center. On Monday, November 6th at 1:30, with the holidays right around the corner, you can learn about holiday fraud prevention and be sure you are shopping safely. Discussion will include topics such as Black Friday shopping, return policies, defective merchandise, warranties, lost or stolen packages, and so much more. Please RSVP to 508-862-4750. On Wednesday, November 8th, the Town of Barnstable's Weights and Measures Department staff will discuss the work they do across the Cape and what they do to ensure there's equity in the marketplace. The talk will begin at 1:30 p.m. at the Barnstable Senior Center. Now let's take a look at this week's board, committee, and commission schedule. Thanks for joining us today. We'll be back tomorrow with another great show for you. On tomorrow's show, we will check in with Town Manager Mark Els, and we'll get a legislative update from State Rep Tim Whalen. All of that and more. For Barnstable Today, I'm Sarah Beal.